My father, Robert, a retired Navy captain whose entire identity was welded to the gray steel of a warship, was staring at the 3 silver stripes on my shoulder boards. For the first time in my life, he was utterly silent. A silence so profound it was louder than any of his lectures. We were standing in his pristine living room, a room that had always felt more like a museum to his career than a home. He had demanded I come to explain the Vice Admiral in my wedding photos, his voice on the phone crackling with a strange mix of fury and possessive pride. He was about to learn he'd been asking the wrong question. 2 months earlier, his voice had been just as loud, but filled with a familiar cutting disappointment. The FaceTime screen showed him and my mother Mary, a woman who treated my father's legacy like a fragile artifact, to be polished and protected. I had been telling them about the wedding plans, about my fiancé David, a gentle and brilliant university archivist. My father scoffed, a sound I knew better than my own name. An archivist, Anna? And you with your little government admin job in D.C. What kind of a legacy is that? The word stung, not just for David's sake, but for my own. This wasn't just about my choice of husband. It was about every choice I'd ever made that deviated from his path. My mother just nodded, her expression a perfect mirror of his disapproval. This isn't what we envisioned for you, she added softly, which was somehow worse. The call escalated quickly from there, his voice hardening into the command tone he reserved for ultimatums. We will not stand up at a wedding and watch our family name be diluted into mediocrity, he declared. My heart hammered in my chest, a dull, aching beat of resignation. I already knew what was coming next. Either you call this wedding off and find someone who reflects this family's standards, or we are done. Your invitations will be returned. We won't be there. You'll be on your own. I refused. The call ended abruptly. A moment later, my phone screen lit up with 2 final notifications, 2 final acts of erasure. My father's contact, then my mother's, vanished into the digital void. I stared at the blank screen, a cold fury washing over the initial wave of heartbreak. They had made their choice. They blocked me, just like that. In their minds, they were cutting off a disobedient daughter who was embarrassing the family. They had no idea they had just disowned a commander in the United States Navy. To understand the reckoning that followed, you have to understand the 2 lives they forced me to live. For 15 years, I lived a life neatly cleaved in 2. There was the world my parents saw, and then there was the world that was real. Their version was comfortable for them. A story they told themselves at family dinners and holiday gatherings. I remember one Thanksgiving a year before the wedding, my father was holding court, at the head of the table, deep into a sea story from his time on a destroyer. He was in his element, the proud patriarch, the retired warrior reliving his glory days. In the middle of his tale, he gestured vaguely at me and chuckled to the table, and Anna here, she followed me into the Navy, bless her heart. She's counting paper clips in a basement at Fort Meade. The table offered polite, knowing smiles. It was a line he'd used for years, a little joke that neatly filed me away as a harmless administrative assistant, a footnote to his grand legacy. Later, when I tried to mention a complex geopolitical analysis I'd just completed, a project that had consumed my life for months, he cut me off with a dismissive wave. That's nice, sweetie. The point is, on the Iriale Navy ships, leadership is what matters. The implication was clear. My work wasn't real. My leadership didn't count. It was the same feeling I got in high school, when my academic awards were nice, but my brother's football trophies were displayed on the mantel. It was the heavy, tired weight of being permanently underestimated. Later that evening, my mother found me in the kitchen while I was rinsing wine glasses. She put a hand on my arm, her touch light and apologetic. "Just let him have it, dear," she murmured, her voice a well-practiced whisper. "His service means so much to him. Your work is complicated. He just doesn't get it. She said it as if his inability to understand was my problem to manage. For years, this was the family contract. I was to shrink myself, to simplify my life into a version he could comfortably dismiss, all to protect his fragile ego. Peace, in our family, was always bought with my silence. It was a price I had grown tired of paying. The reality of my life couldn't have been more different. My world wasn't a basement. It was a skiff, a sensitive compartmented information facility. It was a place of absolute silence, where the only sounds were the hum of servers and the quiet, deliberate keystrokes of analysts piecing together the nation's most sensitive secrets. There was no loud storytelling in that room, only the immense, crushing weight of responsibility. In that world, I wasn't Sweetie. I was commander, and I wasn't just a leader. I was the lead analyst for a critical intelligence directorate, reporting directly to men who commanded entire fleets. I remember one briefing in particular. The room was dark, illuminated only by a massive screen displaying a complex satellite map of the North Atlantic. Senior officers, men with decades of command experience, lined the table. At the head of it sat my mentor, Vice Admiral Hayes, a stern, unflinching flag officer who headed the entire Atlantic Intelligence Directorate. He was a man of few words, whose respect was the most valuable currency in our world. My voice was the only one in the room as I pointed to a series of faint electronic signatures on the screen, based on the SIGINT intercepts and updated HUMINT reports. I said, my tone even and precise. The adversary's fleet movements are a deliberate misdirection. I continued, laying out the data, connecting dots that no one else had seen. I recommend we retask the satellite array to focus on these coordinates. We need to update the CENTCOM operational picture within the next 3 hours. The room was silent when I finished. I was recommending a multi-million-dollar shift in strategic assets based on my analysis alone. The risk was enormous. Admiral Hayes stared at the screen, his expression unreadable. He didn't need sea stories or loud pronouncements. He needed accuracy. After a long moment, he looked at me, his gaze direct and piercing. He gave a single, sharp nod. "Do it," he said. "Good work, Commander." In that quiet, sterile room, those 5 words were a recognition my father had never once given me in 30 years. It was respect, earned in a world he couldn't even imagine. For 15 years, I had kept my world separate to keep the peace. At home, I was Anna, the disappointment. At work, I was Commander. My parents only understood the language of rank and prestige, and I was about to give them a master class, entirely by their own invitation. In the raw aftermath of being cut off, the first thing I felt was a profound and hollow grief. It was a mourning for the parents I wished I had, for the family I kept trying to believe existed somewhere beneath all the disappointment and judgment. My fiancé David just held me as I cried, his quiet strength a tether in the storm. He didn't offer advice or platitudes. He just bore witness to the pain, and in doing so, reminded me that I was not alone. The tears eventually stopped, and in their place, something cold and hard and clear settled in my chest. I would not beg. I would not bargain for their approval. I was done trying to earn a seat at a table where I was never truly welcome. My goal wasn't revenge. It was something far more powerful. It was truth. I decided I would proceed with the wedding, surrounded by the family I had chosen and earned through mutual respect and loyalty. I was going to live my life authentically, without hiding or shrinking any part of myself to make them comfortable. The first step was a conversation I had been dreading. I stood in the formal silence of my mentor's office, the weight of a dozen flags behind him. "Sir," I began, my voice steady, "my father has decided he is unable to attend my wedding. I would be deeply honored if you would consider walking me down the aisle." Vice Admiral Hayes looked at me, his gaze analytical but not unkind. He was a man who understood the chain of command, but also the chain of loyalty. "Your father is a captain," he said, his voice a low rumble. "But he's forgotten what it means to be a shipmate." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. A quiet validation that meant more than he could ever know. "It would be my privilege, Commander," he concluded, a faint smile touching his lips. "The Navy doesn't abandon its own." In that moment, the hole my parents had left was filled, not with a substitute, but with the foundation of something stronger. The rest of the plan was simple. There was no plan. There were no secret machinations, no traps to be set. My best friend, a fellow lieutenant commander, was handling the photography and social media for the wedding. A few days before the ceremony, she asked me what the rules were about posting pictures. I looked at her, and for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of complete freedom. "Post whatever you want," I told her. "I'm done hiding." I knew the naval community was a small world, an echo chamber of gossip and connections. I knew a photo of a commander getting married with a Vice Admiral by her side would travel. It wasn't a strategy. It was a consequence of me finally choosing to live my own life. The invitations my parents sent back sat on my counter. They thought their absence was a punishment. They had no idea it was a liberation. They weren't just missing a wedding. They were about to miss the moment their entire worldview collapsed. Our wedding day was peaceful. That's the word I keep coming back to. Peaceful. We held the ceremony in a beautiful historic chapel in Annapolis, with sunlight streaming through stained glass windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The pews were filled with our friends, a sea of immaculate dress blue and white uniforms, a silent testament to the community I had built. There was no drama, no tension, just a profound sense of joy and rightness. When Vice Admiral Hayes, in his full ceremonial uniform, walked me down the aisle, his presence was a quiet statement of dignity and support. He was the embodiment of a leadership and loyalty my father preached, but had never truly practiced. It felt less like a substitute and more like an upgrade. The reception was full of laughter and camaraderie. My friends from the service and David's colleagues from the university mingled effortlessly. For the first time, my two worlds weren't in conflict, they were celebrating together. As David and I stood at the cake, our hands clasped together over the knife, I saw my best friend Sarah, smiling as she framed the shot on her phone. Standing beside us, beaming like a proud uncle, was Vice Admiral Hayes. It was a perfect, unguarded moment of happiness. I knew Sarah was posting it online, but I felt no anxiety, no knot of dread in my stomach. The truth was in motion, and I was no longer afraid of where it would land. The caption was a masterpiece of unintentional devastation. Sarah wrote, "An incredible honor to witness the marriage of my brilliant friend CDR Anna Jensen to the love of her life. A special thank you to Vice Admiral Hayes for stepping up and showing us all what true #Navy family means. So proud of you, Commander." Each word was a precision-guided munition aimed at my father's entire worldview. The casual use of my rank, CDR, was a fact he could not dispute. The public, thanks to a flag officer for stepping up, was a quiet condemnation of his absence. And that #O Navy family was the final, brutal twist of the knife. It declared that I had found the belonging he had denied me within the very institution he worshipped. The ripple effect was faster and more explosive than I could have imagined. In the small, insular world of retired naval officers, the post went viral. I can picture it perfectly, his old shipmates seeing the post on their feeds, their eyes widening in surprise. Phones would have started buzzing immediately. Text messages would have flown across the country. A digital shockwave of confusion. Kiat Bob didn't know Anna was a commander. Is that Vadim Hayes? How the hell does your daughter know him? Congrats on the promotion. Didn't even know she was up for 05. For a man like my father, whose social currency was built on being the ultimate authority on all things Navy, this was a public and catastrophic humiliation. He looked like a fool who didn't even know his own daughter's rank. The call came while David and I were on our honeymoon. A moment of tranquil bliss deliberately shattered. The screen lit up with his name. He had unblocked me. I answered and put the phone on speaker. His voice was a chaotic storm of emotions I'd never heard from him before. Fury, confusion, and a bizarre, grasping excitement. "I'm seeing a picture of you with the Vice Admiral," he barked, dispensing with any pleasantries. "Everyone is calling me." "Who is he? Is that who you married?" His mind had jumped to the only conclusion it was capable of. He couldn't imagine that the power in that photo belonged to me. He saw a 3-star admiral and immediately tried to claim him as a high-status son-in-law. "You will come home and explain this. Now." It wasn't a request. It was a summons, an order from a man who had forgotten he no longer had command. A strange, icy calm washed over me. This was it. The end game. "Okay, Dad," I said, my voice even. "I'll be there." The drive to their house was surreal. I didn't go in my civilian clothes. I stopped at my apartment first and changed. I put on my immaculate dress blue uniform, the heavy wool a familiar comfort. Each ribbon on my chest was a chapter of my life they'd ignored. Each stripe on my sleeve was a year of work they'd dismissed. This uniform wasn't a costume, it was my truth, written in gold and silver and silk. I walked up the familiar stone path and rang the bell. The door swung open, and my father stood there, his face a thundercloud, ready to unleash a torrent of rage. But the words died in his throat. He froze. I watched his eyes, the eyes of a trained naval officer, do what they were trained to do. They scanned, they assessed, they decoded. His gaze dropped from my face, past the gleaming medals on my chest, down to the thick gold stripes on my sleeves. Finally, his eyes landed on my shoulder boards. I saw the precise moment of recognition, the instant his mind processed the 3 solid silver bars of a commander. O-5. A senior officer. In his world, a peer. He was speechless. My mother appeared behind him, her hand flying to her mouth, a silent, horrified gasp. The power dynamic of our entire lives inverted in that single, silent moment on their doorstep. Without a word, I stepped past them, my polished shoes clicking on the hardwood floor of the foyer. I walked into the living room, where I had been lectured, belittled, and dismissed for 3 decades. But this time, I was the one setting the terms of engagement. My father had spent my entire life teaching me the importance of rank. In the end, it only took a glance for him to finally learn who was standing in his house. The silence in my parents' living room was absolute. It was a heavy, suffocating thing, completely different from the quiet, focused silence of my real world. My father, a man who always had a story or a lecture ready, could only stammer a single broken question. "You're a commander?" I met his gaze, my own expression calm, my voice even, like a briefer stating an unclassified fact. "Yes," I replied. "I have been for the last 3 years." I let the words hang in the air, a quiet testament to just how vast the gap in his knowledge was. My mother just stared, her face a pale mask of confusion. He then gestured vaguely, his mind still fixated on the photo. "And the Admiral?" He was still clinging to the hope that I had married into status, a victory he could somehow claim. I had to dismantle that last, desperate fantasy. "Admiral Hayes is my mentor, not my husband," I stated, my voice clinical. "He walked me down the aisle because you refused to—" Another fact, delivered without anger. I watched as they both flinched, the simple truth of it landing with more force than a shout ever could. Almost immediately they tried to pivot, to rewrite history in real time. "Well, we always pushed you to be your best," my father began, a pathetic attempt to absorb my success. We knew you had it in you. It was in that moment that all the lingering anger I'd ever felt for them simply dissolved. It was replaced by a profound, almost weary clarity. They weren't capable of a real apology because they weren't capable of seeing their own fault. To them, my success could only exist as an extension of their own legacy. It was a story they had to believe. So I held up a hand, a simple gesture that stopped my father mid-sentence. "No," I said, the word quiet but unyielding. "You didn't push me. You pushed me away. You abandoned me on my wedding day because you were embarrassed by the life I chose. My family was at my wedding. You were not." I took a breath, the air in the room feeling thick and stale. I looked from his face to my mother's. "I didn't come here for your approval. I came because you demanded an explanation, and I have given it to you." I let that final statement settle, the fulfillment of his last misguided order. Then I turned my back on them. "I have my own life now, and my own family," I said over my shoulder. "I wish you both well." I walked out the front door and didn't look back, leaving them alone. In the silent house, with nothing but the ghost of their authority. 1 year later, my life was unrecognizable. I had been promoted. The silver bars of a commander had been replaced by the silver eagle of a captain. My world was now a state-of-the-art command center, where I led a team of the nation's brightest analysts. The weight of responsibility was heavier, the stakes higher, but it was a weight I carried with a sense of profound purpose. This was the legacy I was building. Not one of old sea stories and polished trophies, but one of quiet competence and meaningful work. A legacy measured in crises averted and lives protected. The respect I commanded in that room was real, earned through a decade of dedication they had never bothered to see. My life at home was just as rich. David and I had built a home filled with warmth and easy laughter, a partnership of equals that was a sanctuary from the pressures of my career. One evening, we were looking at a framed photo from our wedding, the one of us cutting the cake with Admiral Hayes. I no longer felt the sting of my parents' absence when I saw it. Instead, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the man who stepped in, for the friends who surrounded me, for the husband who saw me for exactly who I was from the very beginning. That picture wasn't a reminder of who was missing. It was a perfect portrait of the family I had built. One quiet Tuesday afternoon, an email popped up in my inbox. The sender was my father. The subject line simply read, "Your mother and I." My heart gave no lurch, no jolt of anxiety or hope. It was just an email. I clicked it open. It was a stilted, awkward paragraph, the words of a man trying on the unfamiliar suit of an apology. He wrote that they had been wrong, that they were proud of me, and that they hoped they could see me sometime. It was the message I had once longed for, a validation I had thought I needed to be whole. I read it through once, my expression unreadable. Then, with a quiet, deliberate click of the mouse, I dragged the email into my archive folder, unanswered. My peace was no longer a negotiation. It was a fact. It was not contingent on their apology, and it would not be risked for a reconciliation I no longer needed. My phone didn't need to be blocked anymore. The boundary was now internal, unshakable, and entirely my own. My father believed a legacy was something you passed down like a family crest. I learned a true legacy is something you build in silence and have acknowledged on your own terms. If you've ever had to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it, share your story below. In this community, your expertise is always recognized.